Ave Regina,
Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
Be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves and gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that they had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
In the rectory, it was decided that I should speak this weekend at all the masses to address the situation with Bishop Labashi. According to the statements that have been delivered, I will read them in case you don't know. The diocese has been informed of a civil lawsuit against Bishop Labashi alleging sexual misconduct involving a minor in the early 80s while serving as a priest of the Diocese of Rockville Center, New York. This is a civil lawsuit for damages, not a criminal proceeding, and Bishop Labashi will be defending his claim. The status of the bishop remains unchanged, and our bishop continues to lead the Diocese of Manchester. In a statement through his attorney, Bishop Peter Labashi said he categorically denies the allegations and intends to fight. We must pray for our bishop. Without calling anyone evil, good, or guilty, all this reveals something. It reveals that left to ourselves, we cannot live without the stain of sin. That's right. We cannot live without the stain of sin. It's there, and it affects us. However, there is a cure. Have we now had quite enough of the food that starts satisfying us? Have we had enough of consuming all kinds of things through the media? Have we had enough? Have we had enough of food that does not satisfy? At God's command, Elisha insists on giving people bread to eat. It's a gift from God. For the hand of the Lord feeds us, as we heard in the psalm. He answers our needs. Indeed, it is time for us as a people of faith to look to the Lord to feed us. 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough, the apostle says. Philip understood that human resources are grossly inefficient in and of themselves. So Jesus took the loaves. He accepted their limited resources of 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. He gave thanks, and the particular word for thanks is Eucharist in the translation of the Greek here. He gave thanks and distributed the bread. It's interesting that if you look at the passage, Jesus doesn't seem to give the bread to the disciples, or to the apostles to hand out. He gives it himself. And so he gave thanks, and in his divinity, he blesses what they have so that they could indeed truly eat. And here is the beauty of our faith. Our faith depends on Jesus Christ. He allows us in our fragilities to assist him with our simple gifts. And if it is only 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, he gets himself involved. But we must understand that it all depends and centers on Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world. This predicament with the bishop reminds me of an encounter I had with someone years ago, a person who wanted to become Catholic. And after an arduous journey of studying the faith, she was very, very happy to be received in the RCIA. And when she had completed the project a couple of months later, I asked her, what's the difference between the church you went to before you became Catholic and the Catholic Church today? Tell me what the major difference is. She just looked at me and she said, that's very simple. It's the Eucharist. And then she said to me, Father, no disrespect to you intended, but in my former church, if the pastor was a jerk, that's all I had. And she said, in the Catholic Church, if a priest is a jerk, I still have the Eucharist. Perhaps that might let us add a perspective to our situation. Then she went on to say, yes, Father, I know you're important because you are a priest. But it's really not about you, is it? It's really about Jesus. And that's what I look at in him, in the Eucharist. And there it is. We must allow Jesus to feed us now. We must become more concerned with being fed by Jesus Christ, especially in the Eucharist. Also in the sacrament of reconciliation, the scriptures, prayer, the rosary, all these things. In our second reading today, Paul claims to be a prisoner for the Lord. He's in jail. And yet, what that reveals to us, he says, in no matter what the circumstances are, he lived for Jesus Christ. But that applies to all of us. That no matter what the circumstances are, we live for Jesus Christ. As St. Paul says beautifully, live in a manner worthy of the call you have received. That was your baptism. You were called. You were invited to be with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. In humility, in gentleness, in patience. Boy, these are qualities that we really need to see today. Humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another in love, striving to preserve the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace as one body, one Spirit, one hope. And so we come together in the body, the blood, and the soul, and the divinity of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist. It's the center of our faith. And we're so blessed to have this personal contact with Jesus. The end of the gospel passage reveals to us that Jesus was greatly concerned that people would carry him off for the wrong reasons. So he withdrew. Today he actually wants to be carried off by you and me. He wants to be carried off in our hands, on our tongue, in our body, in our heart, in our mind. Amidst all scandal, we must look to Jesus Christ to feed us and trust in him. We are prisoners, like St. Paul, in a world that's going astray. But in a living, Eucharistic manner, worthy of our baptismal call, we live in Jesus Christ.
Regina Celi,
Letare, alleluia, qui aquam meruisti portare, alleluia, resurrexit sicut dixit, alleluia.